Lighthouses look like lonely towers, but they were part of something much larger. They became one of the earliest global systems for managing trade, risk, and movement. This is not just a story about warning ships away from rocks at night. It is a story about how commerce learned to control distance before modern electronics. It also runs on trust, predictability, and systems that reduce uncertainty at sea. And for centuries, the sea was the greatest uncertainty in the entire trading world. Storms, reefs, darkness, fog, and bad charts could erase fortunes in one night. A single wreck could destroy cargo, kill crews, delay markets, and shake confidence. That is why lighthouses mattered far beyond navigation. They helped protect economic order. Before reliable lighthouse networks, coastal navigation was far more local and fragile. Captains depended heavily on memory, seasonal knowledge, and pilots who knew specific waters. That worked in familiar regions, but it failed as trade expanded across continents. A growing commercial world needed stable signals that strangers could understand immediately. Lighthouses provided exactly that, fixed points of information in a sea of uncertainty. A lit coast was not just safer, it was more useful for trade. Because capital prefers routes that are predictable, insurable, and easier to survive. One hidden truth of economic history is this: safety infrastructure creates trade power. Once a coastline becomes easier to navigate, traffic increases and confidence follows. Once confidence rises, merchants invest more, insurers price risk differently, and ports grow. So a lighthouse did more than save ships. It changed economic behavior. And lighthouses were early machines for doing exactly that across vast distances. Think about what a captain needed before entering dangerous coastal waters at night. He needed to know where the coast was, where the harbor lay, and where death waited. A lighthouse turned darkness into a system for decisions, and decisions drive commerce. That made it more than architecture. It became an instrument of coordination. A port cannot flourish if reaching it is too uncertain or too expensive. And uncertainty always becomes expense somewhere in the chain of trade. It raises insurance costs, slows departures, reduces cargo confidence, and increases losses. Lighthouses helped reduce those costs by making dangerous routes easier to predict. That difference matters. Trade never waits for perfect safety to appear. It expands when risk becomes manageable enough to calculate and absorb. And once risk can be calculated, credit, insurance, and large-scale investment expand. They made coastlines easier to read, in the same way maps made territory easier to read. A coastline without reliable lights is partly visible and partly uncertain. A coastline with reliable lights becomes structured, timed, and easier to govern. That improves shipping, but it also improves administration and state authority. Because once navigation becomes systematized, governments can organize commerce more effectively. They can protect priority ports, channel traffic, and strengthen customs collection. They can also shape which harbors rise and which ones remain secondary. Where you place safety, you also place advantage. A lighthouse on one route can pull trade away from another route. A lit harbor can become more attractive than a darker rival nearby. And commercial gravity is another name for long-term political and economic influence. Ports do not dominate only because they are geographically lucky. They dominate because systems make them more reliable than their competitors. They help transform maritime geography into an organized economic network. A single lighthouse is helpful, but a network of them changes the game. A network allows captains to move from one known signal to the next. That turns scattered coastlines into corridors of commerce that can be trusted. Once many states and port authorities built such networks, trade became more scalable. Ships could move with greater confidence across unfamiliar coasts and foreign waters. That increased the reach of merchants who were no longer limited to local expertise. In that sense, lighthouses helped globalize trade before radio and satellite systems existed. They provided a common visual language across borders, storms, and unfamiliar shores. A light did not need translation. It only needed recognition and reliability. That made it one of the most efficient information tools of the pre-digital age. We remember steamships and canals, but we forget the guidance systems around them. Yet a fast ship is only as useful as the routes it can survive. Speed without navigational reliability only moves danger faster across the water. So lighthouses were not secondary to trade, they were part of its operating logic. They helped turn maritime movement from a heroic gamble into managed circulation. Managed circulation is the foundation of all advanced commercial systems. Goods must move repeatedly, not just occasionally, for a market to deepen. A region becomes economically stronger when movement becomes routine and dependable. Lighthouses quietly pushed coastal trade toward that dependable routine. Insurers cared deeply about information, probability, and the reduction of avoidable risk. Reliable lighthouse systems signaled that a route was being actively maintained. That maintenance mattered. It suggested governance, oversight, and institutional seriousness. A light on the coast told merchants that someone was managing the edge. That edge management reassured investors who never went near the sea themselves. The same light that guides a sailor can also calm a banker. Once shipping becomes easier to insure, more capital flows into maritime trade. More capital means larger cargoes, more regular schedules, and bigger commercial ambition. So the beam from a lighthouse reached far beyond the waves below it. It reached warehouses, exchanges, insurers, and governments far inland. They linked the uncertainty of the sea to the predictability demanded by markets. They helped turn danger into manageable procedure, and procedure can scale power. The world grows richer not only through invention, but through reliable coordination. And lighthouses were coordination devices placed at the most dangerous thresholds. They stood where open water met rocks, currents, harbors, and state jurisdiction. They marked not just danger, but entry into controlled economic space. A lit approach to a port meant more than safety, it meant organized access. If goods can enter your port more predictably than a rival port, you win. If insurers trust your coast more, merchants trust your market more. If merchants trust your market more, capital, labor, and influence accumulate there. Empires wanted secure maritime corridors because empires survive through movement and supply. A protected route is not just commercial, it is also strategic and political. Lights, charts, ports, and naval presence often worked as one connected system. Together, they made long-distance commerce more governable and more profitable. And profit tied back into state revenue, customs, and naval strength. So, the lighthouse was part of a cycle. It was not a standalone solution. Safer trade increased revenue, revenue-funded systems, and systems protected more trade. That circular growth is how infrastructure becomes power over time. People notice a wreck in dramatic fashion, but they rarely notice the wreck that never happens. Yet prevented disaster is often the true source of durable prosperity. Lighthouses specialized in preventing disaster, and prevented disaster is economically priceless. Because markets hate interruption, and lighthouses helped reduce interruption at crucial points. They kept choke points, harbor mouths, and dangerous coasts commercially usable after dark. That extended working time, improved scheduling, and increased the effective capacity of trade. Even small improvements in reliability can reshape whole systems when repeated constantly. That is why lighthouses became a global system of economic power. Not because one tower was powerful, but because many towers formed a network. A network that made shipping more legible, trade more reliable, and states more capable. A network that turned dangerous coasts into active infrastructure for global commerce. Once the world could trust those lights, it could move wealth farther and faster than before.